And then
Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
It's 8 o'clock, so that means it's Go Astros time. And coming to you with a special Memorial Day episode. And it's special because we talk all the time on this show about not paying attention to the standings until Memorial Day. And we're probably going to end up editing that because we don't like what the standings say. But before we get into that, I'm joined by Brian Arbor, who is actually in the Central Time Zone in Houston, experiencing all the swampy humidity that this city has to offer. You ask why the roof is always closed? This is why. And as always, our founder, our mentor, our guiding light, the shining beacon on the hill, James Christopher.
Good morning, everybody. It is Memorial Day. Let's all remember as we have hot dogs and go to the movies and do all that fun stuff that we are not. It's not really a happy day to celebrate. You're not supposed to say Happy Memorial Day, and that there's a lot of people who died for this country. So keep those people in mind as we go about our day. But go about your day. It's not supposed to be a day spent in mourning either. So that's all I got to say about that.
Mm-hmm. My 11-year-old will walk in the Memorial Day parade in our town. First time doing that with his Boy Scout troop. So
oh, that's fun.
Are they still Boy Scouts? I thought they were Scouting
USA, right?
I know I need to change my language, and I haven't. And there aren't any girls in this
You know what? You don't have to change your language. I know that this is not politically incorrect with James Christopher, but you don't have to change your language.
I'm not going to call it X. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter and continue to believe it's a cesspool. So you don't have to change anything you don't want to change.
Yeah.
Speaking of, having a good Monday, the Astros won a series in Oakland. And that's not necessarily significant until you look at the larger picture. The Astros have won 12 of their last 17 games, which is playing a little bit better than 700 baseball. And that's what you have to do when you give yourself a 12-game hole on the negative side of the ledger. I mentioned Memorial Day being one of those things that baseball purists tend to check in on. Standings matter at Memorial Day, and you know what kind of team you have. We're 3.5 back of the Mariners, and we're playing them the next 4 games. So whatever happens this week, we could end up being 7.5 back all the way to being in the lead in the division, and anything in between those two probabilities. So I guess starting off, what'd you think about the weekend, guys? Start with Brian.
Yeah, I mean, they it wasn't as good as the week of the previous week because they played a bunch of close games. I don't know if y'all felt this way in the A series, but I always felt like they were just going to explode and get out with 10 runs, and then they only scored in 1 inning. But hey, that was good enough in 2 of the games. I think the notable thing, including with the losses, is this team is now getting good starting pitching. And that was one of the big problems at the beginning of the season. It was the biggest sort of structural problem I was worried about. They weren't hitting with runners in scoring position. I said that would take care of itself over time. The bullpen wasn't good. I said that would take care of itself over time. It was a starting pitching. Obviously, getting guys like Verlander and Fromber back and off the IL has been helpful. And Spencer Arrighetti looks like a major league pitcher, which in April I'm not sure he did, but he's matured. He's matured and has developed in his 2 months in the majors, and that's been helpful.
Jim?
Well, I actually spent the weekend in Southern California. We went to 3 different baseball games for the other show. I think it was Lake Elsinore. I did have to listen to someone call the Astros the Asterix, and I just looked at him and said, "You're very clever." Yesterday, or I guess Saturday's game, we were in Inland Empire. I got to hang out with 2 Astros Twitter members, Ephus Tosser and Baseball Girl. So that was super fun. It's now become a thing where we meet in Southern California and get to watch the Astros or talk Astros while we're watching. Why can't I remember what farm club they're for? I mean, I really should. Yeah. I mean, look, I think anytime you win a series on the road, no matter who you're playing against, it's a good thing. Definitely Saturday was frustrating because we've seen that game a lot where the offense is just going to kind of check out and you kind of almost know it from the beginning. And but to your point, Spencer Arrighetti looked really good. The pitching has looked good, and the offense outside of really one spot it's not even it's obviously looking much better, but it's also picking each other up. And I kind of dig the fact that we're starting to see one player kind of dominate a game when maybe some people aren't. Like Myers the other day kind of really dominated that game. So yeah, I think all in all, you got to feel really good going into Seattle. And I know that games yesterday don't matter and games tomorrow are a different thing, but they struggled pretty heavily in Washington. And I keep trying to like look for game inside the game, and they had a long flight to make after that game was over back to Seattle, whereas the Astros had a little trouble down. So I don't know if that's going to affect anything, but I think I think you should see a split this week.
Well, but you go back in time when you go to Seattle in more ways than one, so you gain energy and youth. I've been told in the Pacific Northwest.
You're our local Seattle fan, though. You're a big fan of the city.
I'm a fan of the city. I'm not necessarily a fan of all the residents, and it's a lovely ballpark. I don't like the team that plays inside it. So
yeah,
it's life has a lot of different shades of gray that you have to deal with there. But yes, Seattle can be rejuvenating. But yeah, that's a long flight from DC into SeaTac that the Mariners are going to have to deal with. They do have the benefit of really good starting pitching, so I think that's going to be an interesting series to watch. I think, leaving Seattle 3.5 back isn't going to be the end of the world, although some of our fan base is going to feel like it is because there'll be 2 losses in there and can't cope with that. But the Astros aren't in a great position, but I think they're in a good position considering where they started the season. There are still some holes. There are still some issues, clearly, because you're 5 games under 500. One of those we mentioned, the starting pitching has gotten better. It's improved. It's been more consistent, but the bugaboo with injuries is still kind of hanging over us. This weekend, Jose Urquidy in a rehab start. I think this is beyond forearm discomfort now when you cannot pick up a baseball.
Yeah.
And, the joke has always been the Astros use discomfort for everything. But if you watch that clip that was floating around the internet Saturday, that was hard to watch because that wasn't just I'm feeling some tightness in my forearm. That's I can't pick up a baseball.
That gave me 2009 Colt McCoy vibes, actually, like the story of him. Oh, I can totally play, and then not being able to actually throw the football 5 yards. It's definitely the flashback I got for that.
And then in addition to that, it was reported by the CBS local affiliates that Christian Javier is experiencing some forearm tightness and did not throw his regularly scheduled bullpen session. The Astros are considering him day to day, which I guess we all are at some level. There has been a lot of counting on the pitching getting better and guys starting to come back. And I guess we throw Lance McCullers Jr. in there, who has started throwing sinkers from a rubber in a bullpen periodically. We're sort of seeing film clips of that. How much hope, and I'll start with Jim on this, how much hope can the Astros pin on, I think Urquidy's out of the equation now, but getting healthy and getting consistent starts from the guys you want to be your starters kind of going forward now, or how much does this weekend put us in limbo?
Well, okay, so Javier is a blow no matter how you look at it. And when I hear forearm tightness, I immediately go to, well, we'll see you in 2026, I guess, at this point. Obviously, that's me being a kind of a worrywart. And so I'm not a doctor, and I didn't even play one on TV. The Urquidy thing is a little interesting to me because Urquidy is always that name that people think might be the guy that gets traded. Like, I don't think outside of his playoff prowess where he sort of steps it up, I'm sure Brian he's about right. Brian, he's about an average pitcher, right? He's not. No, he's the back of the rotation kind of guy. Really needed him more for depth than anything else. And the Javier thing adds to it, but Javier's had a kind of a hit and miss season, so we don't know if something's been bothering him. But I think if you lose him for any amount of time, more than say 2 starts, then I think that's a really big blow.
Fun fact: Jose Urquidy career ERA plus 104, 4% better than average. So basically, a league average pitcher over his career. His role on this team was predominantly going to be to provide depth for the 5 starters are fine if they stay healthy, and we're kind of worried about sort of innings for both Hunter Brown and Spencer Arrighetti later on in the season. So it's not it's a blow in that sense, in that you sort of lose some depth here. JP France is also injured down in AAA, so you can't call on him. They signed a guy named Eric Lauer to a minor league contract, and we may see him at some point because
he's the best of what's left.
Yeah, right. He's better than Blair Henley, I think I would say. But it's possible the 3 of us might be better than Blair Henley the way it went for his first start. Though.
I looked sharp on the mound in San Bernardino. I'm just telling you, I could sink on my sinker.
Mm-hmm. Good. I mean, I know you'd put the Sox up high, and that would help. That get you an extra mile per hour on your fastball too. So that's always part of this year. Yeah, the Javier injury is worrisome. The reading between the lines is that it's not that big a deal, but every pitching injury, no pitching injury is not that big a deal. And he's been not fully right all season. He's been hit and miss, as you said. So, at one level, you'd like them to put him on the IL for a month, let him rest, let us get his body healthy. On the other level, it's not clear they can afford that, particularly they can't replace him with Jose Urquidy now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Urquidy, to me, is, as Brian said, he's a depth piece. But when you have question marks around Hunter Brown and up until recently, honestly, Spencer Arrighetti's been kind of a question mark. You lose the option of putting a guy in who can get you 5 or 6 innings in a game. And that's what Urquidy's role would have been. That's not a thing we get anymore. We've had the pleasant supplies of Ronel Blanco, who, yesterday pitched another really, really good game. But you're running out of those kind of guys in the organization who are going to give you surprise seasons, because we're just running out of guys who have the ability to give you a surprise season, frankly. So Urquidy's a blow, not as big as Javier could potentially be. I always worry, and some of this is just anecdotal, but it feels like with pitchers especially, even if you dodge that first forearm tightness, there's going to be another shoe that drops later in the season.
This is what happens this is what happened this year with Urquidy.
Yeah. And so that's worrisome. And then you add to that I would say subpar way the Astros medical staff communicates injuries and how they deal with them. I know a lot of people thought that was going to get better with Dusty Baker leaving. That wasn't a Dusty Baker issue. That was an organizational decision on how they communicate injuries for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into the whole people not understanding HIPAA. But it is concerning. The good news is Blanco's back, looked like no ill effects from missing, a start and a half. Arrighetti's pitching better. Verlander seems to be on a steadier course.
Hunter Brown has pitched really well his last 3 or 4 outings.
Yeah, he's made an adjustment, which is frankly what pitchers have to do in their second and third years in the majors, because the league catches up. It's a really hard league to be successful in. Speaking of catching up and making adjustments.
But before we get there, real quick, though, I think one bright spot, though, guys, is losing Urquidy sucks, but at least we're losing him closer to the trade deadline, where I think you can actually replace him with – you just need a guy who can give you 5 or 6 innings, and I think those guys will be able to be had cheap. And so there's that bright spot of it. I do think losing Javier really does change the outlook of lots of things, but, we'll see.
Well, and we also, Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers are out there and may join us in the second half of the season. I'm using some very cautious language here, particularly when it comes to McCullers, because as we've discussed many times in this podcast, we've seen a lot of Lance McCullers' recovering stories. Those are well covered in Houston media, and I adopt the position I always have is like, I will tell me when he goes on the rehab assignment. I don't care about anything till then.
You can do a lot of things with AI, and you can't tell me that any of these bullpen sessions haven't happened over the last 4 years. I mean, you can't. They put an updated jersey on him. They moved the little Major League Baseball patch from above the collar to below the collar.
So you're saying we might see Sasquatch before we see Lance McCullers back on that.
Astros fans have been wondering if they're going to have their edge now that they've moved past, Jeff Luhnow and James Click to a more traditional GM. But these advances in AI is the next frontier in baseball front office, and the fake Lance McCullers is at the top of it.
All right, the nerds are back in charge. Dana Brown don't do no AI. To the other side of the battery, though, a player that's probably a little bit concerning to some fans, Yainer Diaz. And I'm not down on Yainer at all, but I wanted to kind of talk about this among the three of us because there were a lot of people projecting him to hit 40 home runs. And when I say people, I mean fans. I'm sure Brian's going to come at me with the actual projections for his season. But I would say even the conservative projections, he has so far underperformed offensively. How much of that is the free swinging Yainer Diaz that we were fascinated with and frustrated with last year? And how much of that is it's really hard to be an everyday catcher in Major League Baseball? And I'll start with Brian on this one.
It's both. It's a little of both. He's always going to be limited as an offensive player because he swings so much. He's always going to be a talented offensive player because he swings so well that he can hit balls out of the strike zone and actually do some useful things with that. He'd be a better player if he could let those go, take a few more walks, and only hit balls in the strike zone. It's a lot easier to hit those out. So that's, I think, just him. And you have to take sort of all players as they are. He probably benefited from some last year from not playing every day because playing so much as a catcher is more grinding than at any other position. And so this is one of the transitions for young catchers is to learn to catch so much, learn to do all the preparation for the pitching staff, and to take care of your body in a way so you can still hit. And I suspect Yainer is still learning that because that is, again, to the point we made earlier about Arrighetti and Brown. It's a difficult game. It takes adjustments. He'll do that. Broadly, his skill set's really good. He's probably hitting, he's probably because he's below reasonable expectations. I think people were saying like he hit this many home runs and this many at bats, so clearly he'll hit the exact same rate.
Yeah, and we get in the trouble of fan projections here because it is simply like, well, he hit 20 in 50 games, so clearly in 162 he's going to hit 60.
He hit 270 in 80 games, so he'll hit 400 in. But again. I think the good news is the rest of the lineup is performing pretty well. And that's something they've been able to absorb. There's one or two sort of spots, but getting good performance in particular from Jake Myers this year has sort of made up for the decline we've gotten from Yainer. I don't expect Jake to hit this well all season. I'm a big Jake Myers optimist, but I'm not this much of a Jake Myers optimist. But I'm a Yainer optimist in this sense, is that I believe his skill level is higher than what we've seen, and he'll have a big stretch at some point in the season, and we'll be happy when we get there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always come back to, it's like Tony Romo, right? When a guy comes out of nowhere and has some good moments, it's not hard to believe that maybe they will regress to some degree. I think a lot of that's happening, Andy. Like you said, people now have the book on Yainer. They know they can throw pretty much anything out of the zone, he'll swing at it. I do think it's hard to catch every day. There's been stories, who knows if they're right or wrong, about he's trying to learn to prepare. And so who knows how divided his attention is. I also think sophomore slumps are a thing. So there's lots of things at play. I do wonder if right now the better version of the Astros is Carantini playing more, even if it's more of just a straight platoon or a split. But I think Yainer is going to be fine. Maybe not this year, but eventually. I do think that he's got too many skills that he's going to be able to use. And unlike Tony Romo, I think will be part of a championship team.
Well, for me, the catching piece is the harder part of the equation, because when you talk about good offensive catchers, it's a really, really short list in 2024. And frankly, it's a really short list in Major League Baseball. You're talking Johnny Bench, Yogi Berra, Mike Piazza,
Alan Ashby.
But there is a drop off after the top 10 guys that's precipitous. If you look at just this year, everybody knows about Real Muto because he's probably the best catcher in baseball right now. And then you have William Contreras, who's almost at a 900 OPS. And then I'm just going down the list. Shea Langoliers is kind of your next best catcher OPS-wise in Major League Baseball right now. And that's, again, a small sample size. And there's certainly some guys that are going to look much better than that. But, Adley Rushman, who everybody says, the next best thing is batting 200 right now. And I was looking just games played. The catcher who's played the most this year is Jonah Heim, and he's played 24 games. Catchers, it's hard to be an everyday catcher in Major League Baseball. With the struggles the Astros have had at first base, I really would like to see them give Yiner some starts there. And I'm not wrong.
He does have experience at first base, everybody.
Yeah, this is not a Ron Washington.
You're not doing the Astros Twitter thing where you're like, hey, let's put Lance McCullers at first base because, well, he didn't have to throw.
Well, we come from a fan base that wanted Jeff Bagwell to learn how to throw with his other arm when his shoulder gave out and play third base. Because
is that true? I don't remember that.
Oh,
there was a caller every night on KTRH, 1992, calling for Bagwell to move back to third base. So,
and also just learn
the
about
creative ideas from Astros Twitter are not new. They're just more permanently expressed.
Yeah, and I'm not down on Yiner at all, but I just some of the math people who got really excited about what his projections are, and this is not a Pagoda projection. This is not a Bill James type projection, but just if you do the rate projections,
it's from their testicles projection. They're like, my balls telling me this is going to happen.
100%, and it's always the best thing and never the worst thing. And I guess segueing from the worst thing to the worst thing, Jose Abreu is coming back. Joey Loperfido was optioned last night back to AAA, which frankly is a better opportunity for him. I know he doesn't feel that way right now because it's a whole lot better to be in Seattle than wherever Sugarland is going today. But he gets to play every day. He needs to play every day. He wasn't playing every day, and it's hard to argue that he should be playing over Jake Myers or even Mauricio Dubon at this moment in time. But I think he had a good showing. I think nothing that he did would discourage the Astros front office from what he can be as part of this franchise at the major league level, and he has a lot of stuff he can build on. Having said that, the corresponding move to him being sit down is Jose Abreu is coming back from Florida or Sugarland. And I'm going to pretend just Florida because he did nothing in Sugarland while he was there. Brian has written a Substack article this morning. I unfortunately was en route and did not get a chance to read it. But Brian, if you want to give us the lowdown on all things Jose Abreu.
Yeah. It's hard to be optimistic about Jose Abreu. There was some happy talk from Abreu himself and from Dana Brown and Joe Espada about him having good at-bats and him being, being more relaxed and being himself, which I guess is a good thing. It's a good thing, but hard to believe he's actually improved. I hope I'm wrong. I think we all do. So why are they bringing Jose Abreu back up? The alternative is to release him and pay him $33 million to do nothing. So when they sent him down, they essentially made an agreement with him. It wasn't explicit, but, we'll do this. Here's his plan for you, and we'll bring you back, about now, presumably. I don't know if they had a specific date.
There's no way Jose Abreu went down without a guarantee he would come back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
the second reason is it's easy for me to say they should just eat the $33 million. It's easy for you guys. It's easy for any of our viewers or listeners to say they should eat the $33 million because it's not our $33 million. It's Jim Crane's $33 million. The other complicating part is the head of baseball operations who signed him, the person that Dana Brown and Joe Espada have to say, this is the guy who screwed up and we need this mistake to be to go away and just, assume it and move on, is Jim Crane. And this isn't a Jim Crane thing. This is when your boss does things that are dumb, convincing him that it's dumb is not an easy job for any employee. I think we've all tried to do that with limited success, with the key on limited here. So they kind of have to bring him back, and we'll see how long it lasts, and we'll see how long Jim Crane is willing to pay him to be worse than a replacement player. Obviously, the best case scenario is I'm completely wrong about that, and Jeff Bagwell completely fixed him, and we can go back to loving Jeff Bagwell again.
Hey Jim, how did it go when you tried to tell people in the Army that your superiors in the Army that they were doing something boneheaded?
Actually, quite well, because I was always assigned new lieutenants out of college, so that was it's a bad example. Brian's always talking on the show about he doesn't want to play psychologist, and I think you're playing psychologist at the end there. I'm not sure. We don't know if Jim. First of all, everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted Jose Abreu signed. We've covered that on the show. And the only way to get him was to give him the 3rd year.
There was a bidding war for him. They
right. It was almost a no-brainer, and we would have been mad. We don't know if Jim Crane is in some massive case of denial on this or not. We won't. I don't know that we'll ever really fully know. I have a feeling this leash is going to be short. I have a feeling that the writing is on the wall to some degree, even if it's him just sort of becoming the new Drew Hensley or whatever his name is and sitting on the bench and never playing again.
Greg Kessinger. His name is Greg Kessinger.
Whoever.
His name is Robert Paulson.
So I think we don't know any of what's going on there. I have a feeling, and this is me getting conspiracy theory or article, whatever that is. I think that them sending him against Seattle's pitching staff is not an accident. I almost wonder if they are going to see. We're going to find out in 4 days what he has left, and I have a feeling he will not be the starting first baseman if he does not play up to an acceptable level of play. I cannot imagine ego allowing this thing to fall apart because a first baseman's not hitting. And we've seen what the team looked like when he was playing versus what they haven't. And I don't know if somebody has numbers on what the record is post and pre losing Abreu. I don't like better.
It's been better.
And you look, obviously, and I do think there's a portion of Astros fan base that's kind of hoping for him to fail. And I don't think any of us on this show are hoping for him to fail. I mean, he seems like the nicest guy, and he seemed like he's saying all the right things. And it would be great for him to come out and just be the Jose Abreu of last September. I just don't know that he's going to.
Yeah. No. That is absolutely the hope, right? And there's a lot of skepticism. I cited a lot of people on Astros Twitter who are skeptical, and I know it's not just Astros Twitter. I hope we're all wrong for obvious reasons, because, as you said, we saw last September and particularly October that if Jose Abreu is right, he's a big contributor, and this offense is a lot better. So that is my hope against hope, and I think it's the Astros' hope against hope. But we'll see. We'll see how long the leash is. Because it's the financial piece is, I am playing psychologist. I will absolutely accept that criticism. But I think it's not a criticism specifically of Jim Crane. It's a criticism of, hey, if you got to pay $33 million for somebody to do nothing, no boss wants to do that for obvious reasons.
They always need clerks on the 4th floor concession stand.
There's
always thing, though, to Brian's point, one of the tea leaves we can read, according to Chandler Rome, is where does Loperfido play when he goes to AAA?
Yeah.
And if he's not getting reps at first base, it means that we're going to be stuck with Abreu for a lot longer.
So just pure baseball from a second, beyond the contract and everything else, John Singleton hasn't done exactly anything to lose playing time since he's been made the starter, the everyday starter. Right. I mean, he's not setting the world on fire, but he's certainly better than what we were rolling out there when Abreu was starting 4 out of every 5 days. From a pure baseball standpoint, you're facing Bryce Miller, Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert in the next 4 days. All those guys are right-handed. I'm struggling right now remembering.
They are correct.
So how would you justify putting Jose Abreu in a lineup where even the last 2 years, doesn't hit right-handers all that well, knowing you have a left-handed bat that might get lucky and run into one.
It has good plate discipline anyway, right?
And it's a lot more likely to draw a walk and not strike out. Just from a pure baseball standpoint, I know, we say it's purposeful that Abreu's coming back against a really good pitching staff, but why would he be playing? At least before the bullpens get in the game.
I don't know, but to me, it seems like they're planning on playing him, because I don't understand why he didn't get a few more starts in Sugarland and then join them at the beginning of the next homestand, where you might have given him a softer landing. This almost seems like cruel and unusual punishment to me, because I can't imagine they're not going to not start him. I will say for as dominant as the Seattle rotation has been, at least we get the front part of that rotation toward the end of the series. I know that there's really no weak spots, but we're not going to see the guy who pitched for them yesterday, and we're not going to see Logan Gilbert to the last game. So maybe we can steal a couple before that happens. But I don't know, Andy. I think it feels like they're setting him up for failure to a degree.
Yeah. I'll make this argument here that I don't believe, but I will, give because I think it's an answer, which is that intrinsically we believe that Jose Abreu is a better player than John Singleton. And therefore, the only way you get him to be that player is to play him regularly and get him regular at bats.
The back of his baseball card does say that he's a better player. Dana Brown is not wrong.
He says that in his press conference today. That's a signal to all of us that he wants him gone.
Do people still get baseball cards?
Yeah, there's a whole industry.
Really? Is it as dead as the comic book industry is?
Anymore. It's like Aaron Judge hit his 60th home run. We're going to take his jersey and cut it into 16,000 pieces and put a 1/4 of an inch piece of that fabric inside 2 pieces of cardboard and some cellophane, and then sell it to you as an extra in a pack. And then you have to buy the whole wax box to get the hope of getting that card, unless you just want to pay for it out. I mean, there's a whole industry that actually has kind of come back because it was kind of moribund for.
It was basically the comic book industry for the long time.
Yes, they follow very similar paths. Collectibles.
Yeah. Huh. Weird. Didn't know that.
Look at all that dead air all of a sudden. So let's talk about the Mariners series. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but as I mentioned, the Astros are facing 4 really good pitchers. I think the last time we faced Bryce Miller was the first time we put runs up on him in his career. So we have some momentum, I guess. But Fromber's opening up series. Fromber's been inconsistent. The Mariners were kind of in his head a little bit last year. A lot of people were in Fromber's head last year. So how do we expect tonight to go at least? I don't know if we can project all 4 games, but is tonight the night that we're tuning in and seeing the Astros reclaim the division mentally at least? Brian, I'll start with you.
I mean, depends on sort of their attitude on it because, we saw last year, right, they won all those games at the end of the season when they really sort of had to have it. It was the one time we were like, yeah, this looked like the Astros and the swaggering Astros that we were sort of used to. We've talked about Seattle starting pitching, which is excellent, and they've got the best rotation in the majors. The good news is we get to face Seattle's hitters, and that's good news for our rotation because Seattle has Julio Rodriguez and 8 guys who also hit the ball, who have a bat in their hand. They're not a good offense.
Who also have a back of a baseball card?
Yes. They're not a good offensive team. They try to platoon their way out of basically not spending enough money and haven't developed enough. They developed tons of starting pitching, but haven't developed. They developed Julio Rodriguez and not much else offensively. So I think it'll be a low scoring series. That's not that's an offense. That's a part that suppresses offense, so that will help the pitchers as well. Big thing will come down to is the bullpens, and the Astros should have an advantage there as long as the bullpen we've seen over the last month and not the first month.
I think that's it, though. I mean, I think that's why I have advantage Astros. I think you've seen at least a split out of this because we've also mentioned how much better the Astros starting pitcher has been. So if it's starting pitching versus poor offense, or great starting pitching versus poor offense, or great starting pitching versus good offense, I'm going to expect the good offense to eventually break through as long as he's not the cleanup hitter or the guy that sometimes plays first base. Other than that, I mean, yeah, I think they're going to be close. But there's a part of me that thinks mentally they're out of the hole and they have reclaimed the division. Like the number of games they have made up in this amount of time has got to have the teams in front of them, particularly the Rangers, who are in a free fall right now.
Yeah.
But both of those teams have to be. I know their fans are. Oh, great, the Astros are back. Like there's all that. That's been the reign over Twitter for the last week has been. Oh, great, those guys are back now. So, I mean, even Yankee fans are already like are conceding them losing in the playoffs. Like that's kind of where it is. So I kind of feel like the swagger's back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because the Mariners and Rangers certainly had an opportunity to put the Astros in a much bigger hole than they did.
Mhm.
I think everybody, no matter how much despair you might have had when you were 12 or 13 games under 500, you knew eventually they were going to go on a little bit of a winning streak and eventually dig their way out. They've done that a little bit faster than I think some people expected them to. The fact that they could be, right under 500 by the end of the month, if the next 4 games go really, really well, that would be great considering where they started the month. It's going to be a tough series, though. You're playing on the road. The Astros have not been good on the road this year, although they just won in Oakland. I don't know if that's a major league team. It's not. And then, frankly, they're about to be a AA team for a couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. And I don't think, as much as our fan base is going to put a lot of importance on this series, there aren't really important series in May.
Right. Oh, totally.
This isn't a September series to claim a playoff berth. This is making up more ground. You win 3 out of 4 games. That's a great week. You split. That's not bad. Anything below that kind of sucks, but it's not the end of the world. The one thing you don't want to do is get swept. You get swept, you're back 7.5 games. That's tough, and you've got to climb up that hill like Sisyphus again. And that is my Sisyphus reference for the day. Closing shots, parting thoughts, anything, guys?
Well, I just think definitely this season, this series is going to be probably fun to watch, and it's going to be important. But nothing about this series necessarily cements anything for September.
Yeah.
Like you said, the Astros still have a very favorable schedule ahead of them all the way to pretty much the end of July. And whatever happens, but there's always going to be time for either team to rebound from whatever happens this week. So it's not like it's baseball. It's not like you can just take a breath. You're going to keep playing.
Yeah, and today will be a third of the season, and so it's a lot of baseball, but even more baseball to come. And the Astros had a terrible first 6 of the season and a much better. They're 16-10. In the second sort of 6 of the season, they get to a third today. And again, a lot more baseball to come regardless of what happens, though, I don't know. West Coast baseball is always kind of staying up late at night, always is kind of
Luckily, I'm too old for that now. So.
Yeah. I will give a shout out to something completely different. My alma mater, the Pomona-Pitzer Sagients, have advanced to the Division III College World Series, defeating East Texas Baptist this weekend in Marshall in a 2-game sweep. So we're now we've played East Texas Baptist twice this year, both times in Marshall. We're 4-5 against them. So I don't know how we are against the rest of the teams in the country, but we can definitely beat that school. So luck to the Sagients in Cleveland, where the D3 World Series is this year.
At least East Texas Baptist has eternal salvation, because that's what they sell. As another little special shout out that has nothing to do with the Astros, congratulations to the Lady Longhorns softball team. That was a incredible super regional. They beat A&M 2-1, but both of the last 2 games were down to the wire. Either team could have won. Texas had that little bit. They proved why they were the number 1 team in the country right now. So congrats to them, but good season to the Lady Aggies, because that was a really good showing and a really good year in what is ostensibly the second year in a rebuild. So good job. And I guess College World Series pairings come out today for the regionals. So
well, and also
NCAAs.
At a macro level too, I mean, don't sleep on women's softball, just like people were sleeping on women's basketball for the longest time, and that's woken up. Like, you can watch some really good softball if you find the right teams, and you saw that this weekend, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, if only the NCAAs would stop trying to do regional matchups for television interest when they don't televise games. But that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
For Brian, for Jim, I'm Andy. Have a wonderful holiday. Think about why you have the day off, and go Astros.
All right, guys.